Yo, thanks for coming. Just a quick question. I gave a similar talk on the OWASP Bucharest Day 2016. Is there anyone who has seen it? Here? Okay, just one person.
Yeah.
Okay, so it will be today. It will be about tooling we are developing about our OWASP project. So I will also focus on the older stuff. By any chance, has anyone heard of this project, SecurityRAT? Okay, one. Cool. And so let me introduce myself. As Lana said, Daniel Kefer. Usually I sit in Germany, in Karlsruhe. I work for 1&1. But as we have offices among Munich, Karlsruhe, and Bucharest, so that's why I also move around, and I'm happy to be here. With OWASP, I'm the leader of the SecurityRAT, plus I work also on the SEN project, if anyone of you knows that as a software assurance maturity model. Good. Why we actually started developing something, not because only we were bored, but we were wanting to solve some issues we've been seeing. One of them being fast pace. So maybe all of you know there is a constant lack of security people, and still when you have a look at how these people work, you will find out that they still do a lot of manual work actually, which you could automate. The same thing is for developers. Like everything is getting more and more agile, and basically people don't really have time to deal with security. So unless you make security super easy, you will probably not be accepted, and people will start looking for ways around. Next problems we are seeing. I will be wondering what your experience is, but sometimes you could even forget the word security and just documentation. As with the Agile Manifesto, it says something that you should present the code and not the documentation, which a lot of people understand that there is no need for documentation. So good luck when you're joining a team and you're supposed to work on some software project, or if you're part of security team, you're supposed to do an architecture review. This is actually a very hard job to do, very often. When you have a look at the different SDLC methodologies in the internet, Microsoft SDL, CLASP, SDL even as Microsoft as for Agile and so on, you will find out that security still kind of struggles to map the security activities like pen testing and so on to different Agile methodologies. Usually looking that basically in the beginning, like many years ago, you had one waterfall project where you could plan, and then basically all the Agile methodologies, what they usually do is that they just get the cycles slower, but basically sometimes they get to the point where it's again not achievable. If you have 10 releases per day, probably you will not do 10 pen tests a day or 10 reviews. So that's why what we are doing, and also I think what is a very good idea, especially once you work in a bigger company where you will find 10 or 100 software teams, every team developing it in its own way and with its own methodology and changing it after every second retrospective. So rather focus on the software than on the process. Let the development team deal with the process. What's also interesting challenge, and is there, for instance, anyone who's been dealing with GDPR? Okay, just a few of you. So with GDPR, you will find yourself in a situation that you build a artifact software application, let's say 3-4 years ago. This software application has been live ever since, and right now new requirements are coming. And basically, if you didn't build the application with like the GDPR in mind, which you probably didn't some years ago, you will have really hard time to find the gap actually, because sometimes you might be lucky and you might have implemented a lot of stuff, sometimes you might not. So actually, what are the new requirements? That's just one example in GDPR. The security requirements develop themselves as well. So every now and then you will find new security headers, new browser features you could rely on. And basically one of the challenges is to keep the pace of the artifacts you're having, not only developing features, but also finding out what's your gap to the current best practice. And that was also an issue we were trying to solve. And another thing, you will find many companies, I guess here as well, which don't do all the development internally, but they also, because of lack of capacity, they let other companies deal with the software project. And the situation you will very often find is that while, for instance, the company itself has some kind of SDLC, some security process, basically this gets forgotten once you start buying software from others, where basically, for instance, in the process you might even not have any technical stakeholders. So you might have systems with solid level of security which were developed in-house, and then systems which are worse, sometimes, which were just acquired. And basically no one ever had a look at them. The funny thing is that for your customers, if those external projects are branded as your own company, they don't care whether you did a mistake, vulnerability yourself, or it was some partner of yours. So we believe that this should be comparable, and this is also what we are trying to achieve. We basically don't care who develops the application, if it's something done by a team here in Bucharest, Munich, and so on, or if it's some external company, or if it's even running somewhere in the cloud. Basically, we have our requirement baseline, and we would like all the projects to fulfill it. Okay, so what did we come with? When I was presenting here in 2016, it was not OWASP SecurityRAT. By then it was just SecurityRAT. Meanwhile, we became also OWASP tool project last year. So SecurityRAT stands not for the big mouse, but for requirement automation tool. And the idea is not really a rocket science if you think about it. So what we do, we have SecurityRAT having some requirement baseline. So telling you, do you need to do brute force protection, do you need to worry about SQL injection and so on. So you come to the tool and you tell the tool what are you developing. Are you developing mobile app, are you developing web service, how critical it is, what kind of technology you're using and so on. And the tool gives you your baseline, saying, okay, these are the requirements you are supposed to fulfill. Then, what next? As a next step, you define which requirements you comply with, which you refuse, how are you going to handle those you want to comply with, and then you store those requirements somewhere. We don't process them locally in the tool itself, but as we are heavily relying on Jira, as many companies do. We simply have a special queue in Jira, which serves as some kind of cheap asset management. And basically then, there you open one ticket after other for every software artifact you have. And to this software artifact, there's a YAML file attached where all the definition of the artifact is. What we found out when we started with SSDLC many years ago, we started with Excel tables with these requirement baselines. And one thing what we found out that many requirements basically generate tickets in the queues. So if there is a requirement, implement brute force protection, you will find some quite expensive developer doing copy and paste manually from the Excel and saying, okay, we have to implement brute force protection. So once you have this in some kind of parsable format, you obviously have integration with Jira, so you can also generate all those tickets with batch mode. So you can say, okay, all the tickets you want to comply with, or the requirements, and where you need to do something, you can simply create those tickets in with a few clicks, let's say. And then obviously in the end, this gives you also overview. So you see what did you develop, what's the state of the ticket, do you want to go live with the current state of open tickets you have, and so on. And it enables you giving, let's say, knowledgeable decisions. In our company, we use SecurityRAT in two cases. One of them, obvious, and then the one you want to go for, are the new software assets, which you're going to build. So we kind of empirically found out that is the best idea before you actually before you start coding, you touch the code, to actually know the baseline which you are supposed to comply with. Because obviously there is the shifting left, which I don't need to explain. Basically, the sooner you start with security, the cheaper it is. Not meaning that it comes for free, but it's way cheaper. So this is obviously the case you want to go for, because then you are able to say to developers, okay, this is the baseline, and whatever you develop, and however you develop, and whichever language and framework and so on, these are the requirements you should comply with. We obviously don't have only newly built assets. We have also the existing software assets. So with quite a lot of them, we did gap analysis. Meanwhile, nevertheless, I cannot stress enough that that's not the case you want to go for, because you will find yourself in a situation where even finding out the gaps, okay, so I have the requirement, I should escape my content. So did we do it or we didn't? We don't know. So you start to do code review, then you don't find all the cases. So this is, let's say, the cost gets really high once you have a broken application and you are trying to find out what you should have fulfilled some years back. Especially if no one, for instance, knows the code. Yeah, to show it, what I forgot to say, if there are any questions, just feel free to shoot anytime. So just raise your hand or shout and happy to respond. So the animal, I hope not too many people are using Wi-Fi, because I'm relying on it. The software is running by Amazon. So if you're doing some heavy gaming, I hope that you are in another one. Okay, so the idea, as I said, usually you come to the tool, you say that you want to define new artifact. So we say, okay, new cool app. Then what we are doing here on the Amazon instance is that we simply rely on another OWASP project, which is called ASVS, Application Security Verification Standard, which is kind of like well known. Usually in a bigger company, you will find yourself having some custom requirements that's based on your experience. Still, let's say, based on the common standards, let it be NIST, let it be ISO, let it be web application security standards, but still something like this. So here, OWASP ASVS defines 3 levels. So we, for instance, say, okay, we are processing interesting data or some sensitive data, so we have the most advanced level. We say we are developing a front-end application. What type of authentication? Let's say it's just informational page. So we don't want to change it, but we don't have an authentication there, which means probably also no session management. Reachability is externally reachable, for instance. And you have default implementation type. In your own requirements that you can decide, for instance, is it developed internally, externally, is it cloud requirements, so you can have a different set of requirements. Here we have just the one. And now I click on generate, and basically what's happening now, for the ones who know SVFs, it has like 173 different requirements, and here you will find out that according to the parameters, there are, my virtual box is having some issues. We give it some time. So here I could get rid. I still get quite a high criticality of the application, so I didn't lose too many. But removing, having no authentication, no session management, you manage to get rid of 35 requirements. Usually in a real case scenario, you will usually want to go for as less requirements as possible, obviously, to save some manpower. Now you get this requirement list organized into different categories, and what you do is that you go through this list of requirements and say what are you going to do with it. So here is, for instance, verified that all application components are identified and known to be needed. So we maybe don't know yet, so you write something like to be done. Second, verify that all components such as libraries, modules, and external systems that are not part of the application, but the application relies on them, are identified. You also don't know if this is fulfilled. So you say, okay, to be done as well. And you go through these requirements in the beginning of the project and define your own baseline. And then when you're done, you say you want to store this somewhere probably. And this is where our Jira instance comes into play. So here we have some fictional queue called artifacts. So here I copy the queue address and say export into this queue. Here in this queue I have only epics where I need to give some name. Who, for instance, and I export it. And here I see that the new ticket has been created. Queue I can close here. And here, from the beginning, there is nothing else, just one YAML file in the attachment, plus a link, either a universal one or for the particular attachment, which you can import back to the SecurityRAT. And continue working on that. My virtual machine is having quite some hard time. So I did import. So if I'm a developer who came new to a project and I'm supposed to continue working on that, I usually find information. So okay, what's the deal for input validation? What should I log? What should I not log? And so on. So this is something you want to describe. At the same time, we said that, for instance, everything what is clarifying, so you can either filter here or maybe to not to keep my machine that busy, I do it manually. And with selected requirements, I create Jira tickets in some development queue. So here I will choose another project which I have here. So let's say this is the development queue of your team. Let's say I have tasks, and what I can do also in the batch mode, if I have 20 of them, I can set, for instance, set priority. While I'm creating them, I will say, okay, it's a very high priority, create labels and so on. I create tickets. Now these tickets were created, and now you see also some to do. And anytime you open it, these tickets are also linked to the Jira ticket. And here you will also only find a second file, because linking the tickets means also update of the file. Yes?
Are those fields limited to how it's configured, how Jira is configured, or?
Yes, exactly. So basically, what we do when we ask the Jira, when you enter the queue, it finds out which fields are mandatory, which are optional, and it gives you have to fill out the mandatory one, and it offers you the optional one. Because otherwise, you cannot just by the API tell you want some custom field business. Okay, now we said that the requirements get updated during the time. So what could happen? For instance, here we have like easy CRUD interface for the requirements, where we have so-called requirement skeletons. be again loading quite some time. So maybe the Wi-Fi is not that good. So here I have the first requirement, so I set edit, and I say here, and don't forget XYZ, for instance, whatever it is. Now I close this. My browser seems quite a bit dead. And now, when you come to your ticket again and you open it, for instance, using this universal link, then first it offers you the particular version of the file you have saved. So there should be two now. So we by default import the newest one. Now we will find out that there are some updates available on the server side. So you can have a look at which they are. And here you see what's changed. Don't forget XYZ. So I will, for instance, as a developer, I will accept this change, but it means that I, for instance, have to implement something. So I can, for instance, open another ticket for that artifact. Using a better connection than recommended. So now, and for instance, I say, okay, I need to add another ticket for this in order to implement this, and then I have the full history also in one file. So these are the, let's say, core features. That's the common idea. With the time, we found out that, for instance, sometimes we want to export that and give it to external partners. So that's why we have the create spreadsheet functionality. Or we want to present the requirements which are not clear for us as a team. So that's why we generate something that is quite nice, actually, which I can show. So here I can create, I choose some requirements, I say what I want to be with that, I do a bit of configuration, and I have basically create my PowerPoint for the presentation for the team, and now we discuss the requirements which the team has to fulfill. So this goes faster than creating a PowerPoint, which again we did in the past if needed. Any questions so far? Okay, now, so basically everything what I showed so far, and there was also quite more, you might have seen at the 2016 conference if you, should you be there. Since then we also proceeded quite a bit with some new ideas. And one thing we found out that actually it would be really cool if we say, okay, we have to implement some requirement to be able to test it also in an automated way. Because also, basically, if the developer has implemented some feature and thinks, okay, now I think I'm done, but I'm not really sure, and it would be nice to have someone have a look, then he might create a ticket in your security team, but according to how fast this is prioritized, it may also take some time. So in a scope of a thesis, we came up with a new animal, which is actually not Exactly, Animal is a compliance automation tool. And how it works, that you tell SecurityRAT which requirements you want to test, and SecurityRAT sends them to the API which SecurityRAT provides. What's important to say that we are testing our own requirements, so we didn't open source SecurityRAT. We open sourced the REST API specification, so that you can write the test as your company has defined the requirements. We also moved the idea a bit further, because for the requirements you will find out that some requirements are really easy to test with some standard tooling like set application proxy or Arachne. For some requirements it's better to check them out of your GitLab instance and do the check manually. You can use some plugins, whatever you like. So how this looks like, for instance, here that we have the SecurityRAT. This is gateway, this is a microservice architecture. You can talk to the SecurityRAT from SecurityRAT, for instance, also by some person who tells, please test these following 5 requirements. Or what you can do, you can integrate it into your pipeline and tell Jenkins to talk to the REST API and then test the requirements accordingly. And here, with this example, we have, for instance, 3 microservices. One which you wrote yourself, for instance, and does some your custom checks against the applications. Typically, you will do things like you have a policy for security headers in the company, so you can match whether the policy is, for instance, implemented. Then you might want to do some custom tests. So, for instance, you can include OWASP, which also offers a REST API. Then you can say, okay, some requirements are easier to check in the source code, so you can create another microservice which talks to Git, and obviously you can also combine them. So you can say, okay, I will have 3 different microservices, test the requirement, and see what every one of them means, thinks, whether I'm compliant or not. So just to we didn't open source SecurityRAT, but we open source at least, let's say, proof of concept, which is a very easy one, and I will show how this works if I work with this from SecurityRAT. If my browser catches up. So what we also have, what we use a lot, are tags for requirements. So different requirements have different properties. So I know, show me something what typically I have to take care of within one use case, so that the developer doesn't have to read all 100 requirements. You have those. Or here you can say, okay, give me the ones which are testable with SecurityRAT. Now with this proof of concept, we test just 3, which are all related to different HTTP headers. So what you can do is you can mark them and say, please test. Now you can fill different information. So normally as we use, you can write the application URL here, you can add the Git repository, you can also, if you use SonarQube, you can add your SonarQube key, as they also do some checks. So here, only the application URL makes sense. So let's have a look how the site about security headers fulfills the security headers we want to test. Now with some time the test will happen. And what you will find out that they gave up on public key pinning. And they are compliant with HTTPS header, and they have also HTTPS preloading actively. And also important thing which we have is that it tells you the result and also confidence level. Why confidence level? Because you will find out that some tests, some requirements you can test very easily with very high confidence. So if you are trying to check whether the TLS configuration of your server is compliant with your policy, then it's pretty accurate things and pretty easy things to do manually. If you are looking for XSS, for instance, then it becomes interesting. If you're looking for business logic flow, for instance, then it becomes basically impossible. So that's why also obviously you will usually not ever be in a situation where you will be able to test all your requirements. I'll say some percentage out of those, depending on what is possible to test manually. So this is one thing we came up with. Another ideas we had was that basically you want to explain the requirements the developers are supposed to fulfill to the developers, actually. So in the past, for that we again use PowerPoint. The issue with requirements is, as I said, they develop with the time. Unless you are really hardworking and very with a sense for detail, your PowerPoint will not develop in the same speed as the requirement. So at some point, you will find yourself in a situation where you have quite cool, or you have a training which was quite cool 3 years ago, but now it's quite obsolete because you're training something else than it's in your tool. So for that we had the idea, okay, how would it be if we would allow to create trainings based on requirements, but still having all the features you want to have, custom slides and so on. So we came with another thesis. And what we got is this feature where I have some trainings. So here I can create a new training of foobar, for instance, without description. I can say, okay, do I want to train all the requirements or only some of them? So let's say I do a easy training with 90 requirements. I can decide, do I want to include just the core requirements or by default also to include all extra information I have in the tool. So let's say I will do this. Now I can generate the training. And this is the basic structure which will be generated with all the requirements, which will also always get pulled from the database. Now, this is quite easy, not so much of rocket science, so you might ask yourself why this had to be a thesis. The exciting part of the thesis is when you start customizing the training, you will approach many situations where you have your custom slides and what is supposed to happen with the slides. Or you move one requirement from one category to another category. What are you going to do with custom slides? So we have like such a quite a long list of the cases we had to take care of, and that's why it was done as a thesis. And now you have your basic structure, and here you can say, for instance, for the first requirement, so here I have the skeleton with the don't forget XYZ. I have also the more information referencing some another OWASP project, and what I can now start playing with is, for instance, to a slide, either an empty one, or the funny part is again with HTML5 you can leverage many features which are quite cool. So basically from the very basic one, like having a slide with a picture, having a slide with a code block, which also doesn't get pretty by itself in PowerPoint, through having, for instance, YouTube video if you want to show some hack. You also on the internet, you will find also, for instance, Python shell implemented, and I'm pretty sure that you will find also many awesome ideas how to make the training attractive. So what you do now is that you save the training, and now there are a few options. Basically, if you update, we had a simple case and you just update a requirement, then this gets pulled automatically, the newest text. If you have some special issues, then when it's become interesting, that's why you have more buttons there, including the update button. And what now you can do is to say start, and here you have your training foobar with some predefined template, and also with the requirements and all your slides, code, your Python shell, which should work. So, and so on. So basically the idea is that from now on, the large part of your training just will stay up to date automatically. That's it.
Okay, what framework are you using for generating the presentations?
Vue.js.
Vue.js? Oh.
Yes. What you can also start playing with is that once you have all the data in a parsable form, in the tickets, you can easily talk to Jira API and you can create different metrics, whichever you like. So, which team has the most requirements refused? Which requirements gets refused most often? How often do teams update their artifacts and so on? So basically, whatever fits your policy, you can also get with quite, let's say, not so much effort. Yeah, what we have so far. Roughly 2 months ago, we froze the version 1 and started working on version 2. And the first repos we have on GitHub just starting from the beginning of this week. And I will try to talk about this a bit more.